Emily's dead, Grandpa. But she's been dead for a long time. It's okay. It's okay. I need you to take your medicine. It's okay. It's okay. Grandpa, are you having nightmares again?
I can't tell her. I shouldn't. And even though I shall soon die, I will never speak of the horrible things I had seen during my stay at the Rue D'Auseil, and of that most strange musician, Erich Zann. I have examined maps of the countryside with the greatest care, yet have never again found the Rue D'Auseil. These maps have not been modern maps alone, for I know names change. I have, on the contrary, delved deeply into all the antiquities of the place, and have personally explored every region of whatever name which could possibly answer to the village I knew as the Rue D'Auseil. But despite all I have done, it remains a humiliating fact that I cannot find the house, the village, or even the locality where during the last months of my impoverished life as a student of metaphysics at the university, I heard the music of Erich Zann.
Well, are you going to stand out there all night, or are you going to come in?
Yes. Thank you.
Here. Let me take your coat.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's 5 shillings for a night, 20 for a week.
I'm very sorry.
Don't worry, dear. You can pay me back when you get it. It's all right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. But I don't expect to be taken advantage of.
Yes, ma'am.
Good. Dinner's on the table. You can have any room you like. No one's here but the two of us.
I thought you said no one else was here.
Oh, don't mind that old gypsy. It's all right. It's all right.
Who is he?
He's an old violin player from the old theatre orchestra. Moved here after it burnt down. He never says a word to me. But he pays every Friday with 15 gold coins.
What's his name? Maybe I've heard of him. I'm a fan of the art.
No one knows old Erich Zann, and no one would want to. Don't even think about bothering the old man either. He pays me well for his privacy, and I don't want you running him off with your silly questions. Got it?
Yes.
Good. Breakfast is at 7. Good night.
Good night.
On that night and every night thereafter, I heard the music of Erich Zann in the lonely hours of the night. And although he kept me awake, I was haunted by the weirdness of his music. Knowing little of the art myself, I was yet certain that none of his harmonies had any relation to the music I had heard before, and concluded that he was a composer of highly original genius. The longer I listened, the more I was fascinated until, after a week, I resolved to make the old man's acquaintance.
I love your music. It's really quite beautiful.
and without saying a word, he began to play. He did not employ the music rack, but offering no choice and playing from memory, enchanted me for several hours with strains I had never heard of before, strains which must have been of his own devising. To describe their exact nature is impossible for someone not versed in music. They were a kind of fugue with recurrent passages of the most captivating quality, but to me were notable for the absence of any of the weird notes I had overheard from my room below on other occasions.
Very beautiful. But what about the more haunting notes you play late into the night? The ones that go like this.
The note which he finally handed me was an appeal for tolerance and forgiveness. Zann said that he was old, lonely, mute, and afflicted with strange fears and nervous disorders connected with his music, and wished that I would come again and not mind his eccentricities. But he could not play another of his weird harmonies, and could not bear hearing them from another, nor could he bear having anything in his room touched by another. He had not known until our conversation that I could overhear his playing in my room, and now asked me if I would arrange with Miss Blandeau to take a lower room where I could not hear him in the night. He did not ask me to call on him, and when I did call, he appeared uneasy and played listlessly. This was always at night. In the day, he slept and would admit no one. My liking for him did not grow, though the open window and the weird music seemed to hold an odd fascination for me. I had a curious desire to look out of that window, over the woods, and down into the valley outspread there. Once I went up to his room while he was away, but the door was locked. What I did succeed in doing was to overhear the nocturnal playing of the old man. At first, I would tiptoe out of my room and stand at the bottom of the stairs and listen to his playing. Then, I soon grew bold enough to climb the creaking staircase to the top floor. There, in the narrow hall, outside the bolted door with the covered keyhole, I often heard sounds which filled me with an indefinable dread, the dread of vague wonder and brooding mystery. It was not that the sounds were hideous, for they were not, but that they held vibrations suggesting nothing on this globe of earth, and that at certain intervals they assumed a symphonic quality which I could hardly conceive as produced by one player. He now refused to admit me at any time, and shunned me whenever we met on the stairs. Then one night, as I listened at the door, I heard the shrieking violin swell into a chaotic babble of sound. a pandemonium which would have led me to doubt my own shaking sanity had there not come from behind that barred portal piteous proof that the horror was real, an awful, inarticulate cry which only a mute can utter, and which rises only in moments of the most terrible fear and anguish. Erick sat for some time inactive, his violin and bow lying carelessly on the floor beside him. He sat motionless, nodding oddly, but having a paradoxical suggestion of intense and frightened listening. Subsequently, he seemed to be satisfied, and, crossing to a chair by the table, wrote a brief note, handed it to me, and returned to the table, where he began to write rapidly and incessantly. The note implored me in the name of mercy, and for the sake of my own curiosity, to wait where I was, while he prepared a full account in German of all the marvels and terrors which beset him. I waited, and the old man's pencil flew. It was perhaps an hour later, while I still waited, and while the old musician's written sheet still continued to pile up, that I saw Zann start as if from the hint of a horrible shock. Unmistakably, he was looking at the curtained window and listening shudderingly. Then, I half fancied I heard a sound myself, although not a horrible sound, but rather an exquisitely low and infinitely distant musical note. Upon Zann, the effect was terrible. It would be useless to describe the playing of Erich Zann on that dreadful night. It was more horrible than anything I had overheard, because now I could see the expression of his face, and could realize that this time the motive was stark fear. He was trying to make a noise, to ward something off or drown something out. What? I could not imagine. And then I thought I heard a shriller, steadier note that was not from the violin. A calm, deliberate, purposeful, mocking note from far away in the west. Zann's screaming violin now outdid itself, emitting sounds I had never thought a violin could emit. The shutter rattled louder, unfastened, and commenced slamming against the window. Suddenly, the window was thrown open, and the chill wind rushed in, making the candles sputter and rustling the sheets of paper on the table where Zann had begun to write out his horrible secret. I followed the flying sheets in desperation, but they were gone before I reached the open window, the only window in the Rue D'Auseil which one might see above the vast wilderness. And as I stood there in terror, the wind blew out the candles in that ancient room, leaving me in savage and impenetrable darkness with chaos and pandemonium before me, and the demon madness of that night-baying violin behind me. I crawled along the floor in the dark, without the means of striking a light, crashing against the table, overturning a chair, and finally groping my way to the place where the blackness screamed with shocking music. I felt ahead, touched the back of Zann's chair, and then found and shook his shoulder in an effort to bring him to his senses. He did not respond, and still the violin shrieked on without slackening. I shouted in his ear that we must both flee from the unknown things of the night, but neither he answered me nor abated the frenzy of his unutterable music. I shuddered, though I knew not why, until I felt the still face, the ice-cold, stiffened, unbreathing face whose glassy eyes bulged uselessly into the void. And then, by some miracle, finding the door and the large wooden bolt, I plunged wildly away from that glassy-eyed thing in the dark, and from that ghoulish howling of that accursed violin whose fury increased even as I fled. Despite my most careful searches and investigations, I have never since been able to find the Rue D'Auseil. But I'm not wholly sorry, either for this or for the loss in undreamable abyss of the closely written sheets which alone could have explained the music of Erich Zann.